cracking, guys? It's another sit down with Sam, and I got a special guest on today. My boy Gunner from Detroit. Introduce yourself, homie.
Gunner Lindbloom from Detroit. Yeah, no, I think once we get going and you kind of learn a little about me, you'll be thrown off by my last name Lindbloom. So I always kind of clear that up in the beginning. My mother's last name is Toko. Grace Carmela Toko is my mother. So then you have a better understanding of the rest of my story. You know, I'm half Sicilian. I was raised by my Sicilian grandparents. They're from the old country.
Okay. And so growing up in Detroit, how was that? How was your childhood, would you say? Was it crazy? Was it normal?
Oh my God, dude. That's a whole show in itself, dude. But I'll do my best to kind of try to sum it up so I don't bore everybody. But so my parents divorced when I was 4. I had some psychological issues. I'm not sure if it was because my father was a drunk. My mother was mentally ill. I was hyperkinetic, which today they call ADD, I think. Back then it was defined as hyperkinetic. I was a little spaz. And so my parents divorced when I was 5. And so maybe 6. I went to first grade. The second day of first grade, there was this kid. I always describe him as like a 5-year-old Luca Brasi. I don't know if you know who Luca Brasi is, but yeah. So, and it's funny, I got some boards sitting here because I'm remodeling. And what happened was this big bully kid who had been held back like a grade or 2 because he's a big slow kid. He's bullying all these other kids. And I'm watching, I'm like, finally I pick up that they had these building blocks that were like 2x4s and 4x4s and stuff. And you could build stuff with them, as kids. I picked up this 2x4 thing and just started smashing this freaking kid. I hit him once in the head and he kind of covered up. So I hit him in the back, boom, boom, boom. So I'm suspended. It's my second day. It's my second day in first grade. And this is in a really nice affluent area, by the way. My grandparents lived in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. And I don't know if anybody knows where that is, but look it up. It's, I guess this is what they say. Square foot per square foot is the most expensive real estate in America, even more than Malibu. It's very, very expensive. Our house wasn't nothing that spectacular. Today, my old house that I lived in, it's probably a 4,000 square foot, nice big colonial, but we didn't live in the really richy area, up the road a couple miles. Some of the other mob bosses in the area live very close to me in some bigger houses, like Jack Toko, which is my uncle, my grandfather's first cousin. I'll get into that later. But so keep in mind, it's a really nice affluent area. I mean, I guess our house probably would be like modern day equivalent of $3 million or something like that. It'll be it's pretty nice house. It's expensive. Like that house in a regular area would only be like $800,000, but because it's in Grosse Pointe, it's like $3 million. So, anyways, and it was a gift. It was given to my grandparents as a gift on their wedding day by my great grandfather. Gave them a gift. He didn't speak any English. He came from the old country. Here with about like an equivalent of like $5,000 in his pocket, and he started a business, a fruit business, where he went to all these car factories and pulled up with like a literally horse and buggy and all these fruit, and they come out at lunchtime and break time and he'd sell them the fruit. And that he built that into a construction company. Not long after that, got some massive contracts through mobbed up connections. Was able to get these big contracts to build all these homes and apartment buildings. And about 5 years after he was there, he was a multimillionaire, even back in 1935 or whatever it was, 45, whatever it was. And so he gave them that house for their wedding gift. And so that's the house I grew up in. But the area was like this very affluent, nice uppity area. And then they took me and throw me into the freaking into the school, and I didn't fit in. And so that was set the tone for the rest of my life. It's funny because I'm using them words because somebody started a wiki page for me and I was reading it and I'm like, and that's exactly what they said. And it did set the tone, because after that it was not nonstop getting in trouble and fights and suspensions, and it really never stopped. I don't know why I was such a rambunctious kid. Here's the thing. Let me try to make this clear. Where I live, this very affluent enclave of very wealthy people, in the middle of it, in about a 5-block radius, maybe less, 3-4 block radius, was the hierarchy or the administration of the entire Detroit Mafia, all of them. Damn. And these are some very famous dudes. I mean, you're talking like literally characters like the Godfather, like Don Corleone from the Godfather. That's where they live. And all the upper echelons, they all live together. And they called it the newspaper and FBI called it the compound. And some had tunnels connecting to each other. And a lot of the money came up through Prohibition. They made millions and millions of dollars in Prohibition and had tunnels that would connect to Canal a couple blocks over, and then they bring the high-end liquors in from Canada, either on the ice in cars. They drive these cars across the ice in the winter, like right now, or they take boats across in the summer, and then they unload them into these boathouses, which had tunnels going to various houses, including ours. And so they've done specials on those on like 2020 and stuff like that, where they found these tunnels and they realized what it was. But so all that money really put like the top mob guys on. Black Bill, William Vito Tocco, and his cousin Uno Zarelli were able to muscle out the Jews, the Purple Gang. It was kind of amiable. It wasn't like they went to war with them, and they basically said, either you acquiesce or surrender your interest in the liquor business, or we'll kill you all. And that we have we're bigger, we're more organized, we have more soldiers, we have more boots on the ground. He said so, and the Jews had made millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so they're like, okay, and they took their money and invested in legitimate businesses and just kind of walked away. And that money is still being passed down. They're still being passed down to the ancestors, the descendants of those guys. But anyways, so I grew up in this neighborhood, right? And I didn't know any of those old dons. I was born about the time they died. And then Jack Tocco took over the family shortly after, a few years after I was born. I was a little kid. And this is my grandpa's first cousin. He only lived like 3 blocks away on Middlesex. And so my grandpa was very close to him because they grew up together and their fathers were brothers. So, and there's a whole story behind that I won't even get into. But it's my grandfather, I don't really know his official standing in the family. I don't think he ever wanted to be a made guy because he didn't want to kill anybody, This is my theory. I'm hoping this is true. I don't know. I didn't know him when he was young, you know what I'm saying? I only know him when he was old with my grandpa. He didn't seem like the killer type. He didn't seem like the gangster type, but he was around him, and they were his boys, his kumbadis. They call him kumbadi. And that's what so they would come over all the time. We're talking the highest levels of mob. The boss comes over, the street boss comes over. He wasn't that close with Tony Zarelli. We would go see him at his restaurant sometimes. Tony Zarelli, by the way, was the underboss. And there's a whole interesting story about the evolution of the Detroit mob hierarchy. If you go to my show, my channel, and watch Motown Mob Murder. So I do a series called Motown Mob Murder, Scott Bernstein. And we kind of discussed what happened when William Vito Tocco and Uno Zarelli decided they wanted to retire, move to Miami. They had to hand over the family to someone else. They handed it over originally to Tony Zarelli, right? But he was kind of a dunce, and he ended up getting busted skimming $4 million from casinos in Vegas. It was the first mob bust in Las Vegas was Detroit. $4 million was a lot of freaking money back then. This is like 1975 or something. And so not even, it was like 73. So the boss, Uno Zarelli, is humiliated in front of the entire national commission because Uno Zarelli was on the Mafia's commission. He was one of like 10 guys on his commission. And he was kind of the de facto moderator between families, believe it or not. You can research this. It's easy to find. There's a lot of FBI documents and wiretaps that defer to this. They transcribed the wiretaps where they were saying, well, this beef is here, that beef is here. And they said, call Uno and he'll decide. So He decided. Not saying he was the boss of bosses. I'm just saying they deferred to him. He had a lot of power. And so he was humiliated when his son got busted with his casino scam because now other families were getting looked at for the same thing. The son goes to prison for 4 years for this casino scam. So while his son's away, he names his nephew, Jack Tocco, the boss. So when Tony gets out, he's pissed. He's livid. It was his family. He was the boss. Yeah. Now I take it away and give it to his cousin. So his cousin and him were never close again. They grew up brothers, cousins. I mean, they just very, very close. But their mothers were like their mothers were sisters, excuse me. So they were just very close. Anyways, this beef kind of started and it never ripped. So the family fractured into like 2 families almost. You had the Zarelli crew, and then you had the Tocco crew. And then really the most powerful crew, in my opinion, was the Giacalone crew. And Tony Giacalone and Billy Vito Giacalone, they were the street bosses. So Tony was the street boss, and he was the face of the mob. So many people in Detroit I'd meet and they go, oh yeah, Giacalone's, they run the Mafia. And I'm like, no, it's the Tocco Zarelli crime family. No, Tony. and I'm gonna argue with someone. I'm like, okay, but Tony Jack was the street boss and the face of the mob. He was a gangster of gangsters, bro. And he's been listed in the top 10 gangsters of all time. And there's a reason for that. They suspect him of almost 50 murders. He's never been convicted of a murder. He did get convicted of like a racketeering, did 7 years when I was from like age 7 to 14. And when he got out, he went straight to like hanging around our family because his daughter married my cousin. So, and my grandfather was a layoff book, sports book layoff. And so Tony was the king of the sports racket in Detroit. And I'm talking huge money. It don't matter how much I tell you. I tell your audience, you won't believe it. It won't. There was one book alone. I'm not even going to say the name of the guy running it because they're still in business. But one business alone, the FBI estimated was $100 million a year booking, and that's one crew of like 20. So just they were really pouring in. They had a lot of rich like Jewish guys and businessmen and professional athletes and stuff like that who were betting and playing and gambling. So these guys were killing it. And so if you were a sports bettor or a bookie, some of it went up to Tony. He protected you. You know what I'm saying? He what he would do is keep guys from like me coming over and say, hey, listen, you know, you're booking 20,000 a week, man. I need 10% of that, or else. You know what I'm saying? I need 10% of that, or I freaking break your jaw. And there was times where I was sent to do that, and they didn't do it. So I just wham, knock their teeth out, you know, and just grab them and say, "You think this is a game?" The next guy come with a fist, mother effer. I said, "You pay up," and they would. Most of the time, there was never a problem. And all the like 16 years, I did that for like 10, 11 years. I did that like 5 times, you know. And so everybody paid. It was symbiotic. There was a number of layoff bookies. So if a bookie couldn't balance his book, he pushed the off bets to a higher up bookie who would balance his book. But if he couldn't balance, he'd go to another higher up. And then it would get to the point where it's like they would call Tony, and Tony's like, okay, call Pete, my grandfather, and Pete would call Vegas. So they get all the books balanced. You have an hour before game time, the books balanced. Don't matter who wins, they're going to get 10% vig, you know, 10% juice. And so who cares? They don't care who wins. They don't. But these guys were professionals, man. They were handicappers, and they'd have 4 phones running. They'd sit in our living room and just be, you know, watch college football. And they really focused on college football a lot, college basketball too. And anyway, so they made a freaking fortune doing that. So when growing up, I saw a lot of stuff. One of the things that I saw is, you know, this is poignant to my story. Sorry, your protein shake. I'm thirsty and I'm hungry. Is growing up in my family the way I did, around the people I did. In hindsight, you know, I look back and go, wow, it's pretty obvious. But to me, because I was around it like 24/7 every day since birth, it really wasn't remarkable at all. It was normal. It'd be like saying to you, was your home remarkable growing up? You're like, not really. It's my life. I knew kind of subconsciously that we were different. And the reason for that so there's something called the Eastern Market in Detroit. So it's a very famous area. It's like a 1 mile square mile of like produce vendors, meat vendors, but you know, slaughterhouses, yada yada yada, and it's all Italian owned and it's all mobbed up, right? And I can't even. It's like something out of a movie, man. So you imagine this really old area with these warehouses, one after another, a warehouse, and it's literally like a square mile, right? And the front of the warehouses face the street, and you can literally they have like these you know, like loading docks. You can walk from one dock to the next dock to the next dock. You know, so you go inside each one of these businesses. Now, I'm not on coke, man. My nose runs.
It's cold there. There's no heat in your office. You're remodeling.
No, it's more than that. I have trigeminal neuralgia. I don't know if you ever heard that, but it's makes the nerve in my nose starts to vibrate when I talk, and it gets stuffy and it hurts and it itches like a headache. Yeah. So anyway, that's what's up. So you go in any one of these businesses, and it's literally just like a movie, bro. So you walk in, you go, hey, Dom, what's up? And there's 4 or 5 young wise guys sitting around, any ages from, you know, 18 to freaking 30 mostly, but some older guys too. And they're sitting there playing cards, and they're sitting there playing dice, and they're just, you know, shooting a gip, hanging out, right? And they're waiting for the trucks to come in, and they may help load the trucks because they're filling orders, you know, and they have orders all over the city. The contracts come from the city, and you know, private vendors too, could be banquet halls, whatever. You know, the contracts are all mobbed up. They're all, you know, getting through connections in the city with the mob, and the boss is the one who really delves out the contracts. My grandfather had a contract to cater to all of Wayne County schools for 40 years. Now,
Wow.
he brought produce and food and milk and everything to all of Wayne County schools. It's an enormous contract, enormous.
Yeah.
He had 20 trucks going out, and they'd make like 3 trips a day out into the city. Come back, load up, come back, and Toco Produce was called. And so he had like working for him, he had like 4 or 5 black dudes that were good dudes. They did work hard on the dock. But then you'd have like his kind of management guys, which would be my uncles, and they'd all hang out, like I said, playing cards and playing dice. And that contract, people ask me like, how the hell did your grandpa get that contract for 40 years? I look at him and I said, really? His cousin's the boss. All he had to do is tell his cousin, I need a contract, and he'd go to the city comptroller or the city official that he helped get elected through the unions, because they told the unions, vote for this guy, he's our guy, he's good for us, and the unions vote for the guy, and he gets in. Now when he's in, he said, listen, you got to give us these contracts, be it construction, be it whatever. And so he just said, give me a contract, and plus I'll give you a kickback. So now let's say my grandpa was earning a modern day equivalent of $500,000 a year, right? From that, he would probably give his cousin $250,000 of, just because and then 200 out of that, 150 would go to the official that gave him the contract, and it's just a symbiosis that cycles every year. Now imagine if you have 25, 30, 40 of these things all going at once.
Oh wow.
So you have, and that's not even a real big one. So imagine how much money the boss is. The boss, when he died, the FBI estimated he's worth $100 million at least. We owned 100 businesses across the country worth $100 million. And the thing was, that's probably a low number. And the thing was,
and back
he
then,
only served,
back in the day,
he died in 2014. So
okay, I got you.
Yeah, he died in 2014. So, but I mean, and he only served 18 months in prison. He did get busted for RICO in '96. He bought the judge, was able to buy his way out of it, and they only gave him 18 months in prison. So, of course, the prosecution and the feds were like, what the fuck? Are you kidding? He just found him guilty on RICO conspiracy to control the mafia for 40 years, and you give him friggin' 18 months? They were outraged. But, money talks, man. Or maybe it was blackmail. Maybe it was blackmail. Maybe it was whatever the case. Obviously, it was dirty. Something was in the game. But, so, anyways, I see these things growing up, and we go to the market, and say I'm with my Uncle Pete, which is my mother's brother. So my Uncle Pete was kind of what we'd say cicerone. He was a guy who kind of taught me that life and about who's who and how it all works and the rules of the mob and all that. And because when I was a kid, I had friends say, I can't hang around you. And I said, why? He's like, because my mom says you're in the mafia. What the frick is the mafia? So I'd ask my uncle who lived with us. He's like, don't, it's just our family. You'll learn someday, whatever. Well, I got to be about 13, 14, 15. I started asking, he started explaining it, starting to register. Now I'm looking at how people treat us. So I could go to this little corner store that this guy named Gus owned, a Greek dude. And I go in there with my friends and some of my cousins, maybe, because my cousins all lived in the neighborhood too. And like I said, the whole hierarchy of the mob was there, and their sons and grandsons and kids were all there. And I'd walk in, and because he was a toco, because I was a toco, I'd grab some ice cream and I said, can I get 25 fishies and some squirrel, like these little candies, and they put them on the counter. I throw my change up and say, how much? And they said, no, Alonzo, no, tell Papa I said hi. Tell Papa. And matter of fact, he says, hold on, let me give you something from Mom. And he'd go in the freezer and grab some meat, and he'd come out, hey, give this to your grandma. Tell her we said hi. And I'm like, okay, because we lived a block away, and he wouldn't take my money. So obviously I noticed that. Now other kids are looking at me like, frick, how'd you getting away with free candy, man? How you getting away without it? And so and then we go to the market, same thing. Walk in there's all those warehouses, and inside of them are all these freaking young wise guys and gangsters. Not all of them were gangsters, not all of them were wise guys, but they looked like wise guys. The Italian dudes they looked like the prototypical in the movies Italian dudes, sitting there playing cards, smoking cigars, and laughing and playing dice. I mean, they looked like straight out of Central Casting. Some of them were serious wise guys. Some of them were real deal, and I learned who they were as we went. You just kind of knew. But anyways, they treated the wise guys differently. You see what I'm saying? Have you sat in there with them for a couple hours, and people would come and go, right? People come and go, and they go, hey, Mike, hi, Pete, hi, Frank, hi, what? And then a wise guy would come and they go, hey, Peter, how you doing, Gumbari? And they shake his hand. And they go, what can I do for you? And he's like, listen, man, I'm here to get some meat for my wife. And she wants to make a pork roast. I got you, Pete. Hold on. They go in the back and they make a big pork roast. He said, here you go, Pete. Tell Mom I said hi. And Uncle Pete pull his money out and say, "Oh, how much I owe you?" He's like, "No, you're insulting me. Don't insult me. I never take your money. Get the frick out of here, bro. Beat it." And then he's like, "Sure." He's like, "Get out of here." And so they shove him on their way, and I'd go with them. I was his little sidekick because he was only 12 years older than me. See, so he was like my older brother, and he lived with me. So I lived with him, and he was like my older brother, and he loved me. He just dragged me around everywhere. He had a new Cadillac, gold chain, wore track suits, or sometimes he wears suits. And he had a bunch of biker friends, that were like, biker gangster bikers. And so I'm witnessing all this. And then just to give you another quick little story of how my uncle kind of helped transition me into this world. I was like 11 years old and I saw a mini bike because at this time I was like 12 or 13. And my mom had moved us out of the house. We got our own house. We lived there a couple of years, but mom was mentally ill, got sick. I ended up having to go live with my dad. But because I lived with my grandparents like totally 11 years. And so we'd always go to their house for the weekend, my grandparents, back to the old neighborhood, right? So it was like a 20-mile ride to my grandparents' house in the old neighborhood. And we'd do our laundry, and my grandparents would give us a bunch of food, and then we'd go back. So we spent the whole weekend there, which I love because all my cousins and my boys, all my friends I grew up with, they're all there. So I couldn't wait. I'd bring my bike, I'd get out of the trunk, I'd go chase around my cousins, and hey, and I'm back. And like, "Hey, Alonzo, where you been?" And they didn't really, it was hard for kids to register that I moved, I left. And so I see this mini bike one day, and I say to my uncle, "I wanted that mini bike so freaking bad. I don't know why." It was on the side of the road, and they were charging $95 for it. And I told my uncle, "Uncle Pete, man, I saw this mini bike. I want it really bad, man. We buy me this freaking mini bike." Because I see him pulling out knots of money like this, bro. Yeah. I mean, like just racks, I'm pulling them out, like and paying, flossing, gold chain. He's got a gold chain and Cadillac, and he's only like freaking 22 years old or whatever it is, 23 years old. And he says, "I'm not buying a freaking mini bike." He's like, "But I'll tell you how to get it." I said, "Well, how?" He says, "What you do?" He said, "You get one of those Jerry Lewis cans from 7-Eleven. It's a little can that you donate to muscular dystrophy. So you stand out in front of the 7-Eleven or stores. Say, 'Hello, would you like to donate to muscular dystrophy?' People walk out with their change and they just shove it in the can, $1 or some change. 'Would you like to donate to muscular dystrophy?' He's like, then when you get the money, they fill the thing up and keep the money and go buy your mini bike." Now, I don't know how evil that is. I don't know how scumbaggy that is. I'm just a kid. My uncle's telling me to do this, and I look up to my uncle like he's somebody. And he says, "Do it." I'm like, "Okay, I do it." So that's what I do. I go mini bike, and I go in front of this Kmart. I drive like 5 miles on my pedal bike, go to this Kmart, which is a long ways for like a freaking 12-year-old kid to go. Yeah. I filled that can up like 3-4 times, dumped it in the bag, went back to my went home, dumped it out at $140, called my dad and said, "Come pick me up. I want that mini bike." And we went and got it, $90. So my dad was able to Jew him out of 5. So anyways, a year later, he said, "I wanted this bike really bad, a Haro freestyle. I want to get into the freestyling thing on the bikes. I liked it. I was watching a kid in my neighborhood do it. I thought it was cool. And the bike I wanted was like $350, but my mom was poor. She didn't have money like that. She's like, "I can give you $100 for your birthday." So I went to Uncle Pete and buy me this freaking bike. Uncle Pete, "Get the frick out of here. I'm not buying you no bike." "I mean, you got the money. Get the frick out of here. I'm not buying you a bike." He says, "Go get your cousin Frank." I said, "Well, why?" "Just go get him." So I go get cousin Frank. He lives a couple blocks away. I get him. He's a bad kid, real bad kid. He ended up killing a bunch of people, and he's in prison right now. But I've seen him do horrible things, man, horrible things. And so he comes, but he's a really good-looking kid, and like he came from kind of a good home. He lived in a big house. Like his dad was a mob guy who was in prison, and then his mother married some other like rich dude. So, anyways, he says, "Frankie, go steal Alonzo this bike. Go steal him this bike. Go up to Grosse Pointe South, wait till they're in school, go over there and steal this freaking bike for him. He'll give you $50. Now, $50 is a lot of money. You're talking 1983 or whatever it was. Yeah. A lot of money. It's like $500 now. So he says, yeah, no problem. Man, ain't nothing. I'll do it for free. So he goes. I come back the next weekend, like I did every weekend, and go to his house. And the bikes that I wanted wasn't the exact bike I wanted, but it's close freaking enough. I want a Haro Master. It was a Haro Sport. Took it, gave him $50. See how that works. So now my uncle's teaching me that there's always an angle. There's always an angle. So then I end up getting expelled from school at age 15 indefinitely. Caught in a stolen property ring at school. The guy was dealing with the scumbag. He was stealing out of lockers, and there was a way you could break into lockers, and he was doing it. He was stealing all these coats and stuff. Then he came. This is one of my best friends, and then he comes to me and he's like, "Yo, I got this badass black leather jacket. It's my brother's. Don't fit him anymore. Give me a quarter ounce of weed for it," because I sold weed. By now I'm kicked out of school. No, I wasn't expelled yet. I was selling weed. I wasn't expelled yet. But I had already been expelled the previous year. in 8th grade, they could kick me flat out. They're just like 10 weeks before the school ended, they just expelled me and said, let the high school deal with them. He won't last long, and I didn't. So I'm 9 weeks into high school now, and I hated it. I mean, I love school. I hated the schoolwork, and which is kind of strange because it turned out to be like a savant. I write novels for a living. That's what I do now. So
shout them out real quick. Shout out your novels.
To Be a King. Yeah, I'll get to that. To Be a King, Volume 1 and 2. Perfect 5-star reviews. They're over 500-page novels each. This is Volume 1 and the very first edition. So this is literally my first edition of Volume 1. It's collector's item here, but they're being compared to The Godfather. So a lot of people, if you look at the reviews, 113 reviews, whatever it is, and they're all like, "This guy wrote the next Godfather. This is the Godfather our generation." So check it out. Read the reviews. They're all real and organic. So anyways, I get caught with this in the stolen property ring. I buy this coat for a quarter ounce of weed, which is like $20 to me, and I wear this badass leather to school. I mean, I had all kinds of leather. I had like troop jackets, Man Alive jackets. I had it all. I was a known drug dealer. You know what I'm saying? I wore a big old chain, big fat gold rope chain. Yep. I thought I was a rapper. I don't know why I thought I was a rapper, man. I dressed like a rapper. I had the LL Cool J troop jacket, which was actually kind of like this. And yeah, and so I wear this thing to school. The kid who had it stolen from, sees me, reports it to the cop. They call me in there. "Where'd you get the jacket?" I'm like, "I bought it from some guy, off the street." Who? I won't tell them. They suspend me indefinitely. And then my Grandpa Toko, it's the first and only time I ever seen him try to I guess intimidate somebody. We had a meeting with the school board director, superintendent, whatever, all of them. There's like 5 people in there, probably a cop. One of them was a cop. And my mother and my grandpa went in there and sat down, and my grandpa walks in, he looks around on them all, and he says, "Do you know who I am?" An old Italian dude. And I should send you a picture. You can cut it in here. He says, "You know who I am?" And like, "Yeah, Mr. Toko, we know who you are." He's like, "Well, I want my grandson to graduate high school." And he said, "Well, we don't want him. He's not welcome here. He's a bad kid, man. He's fighting. He comes to school smelling like weed. He's involved in stolen property. He's just a freaking bad apple, man. We don't want him." He's like, "Oh, I want to see my son graduate." He's like, "Well, he won't graduate from here. He can go to adult dad, blah, 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 but not here." And they were stern. They didn't want me. And they said, "Get out." And they wouldn't take me. So they expelled me indefinitely. So I ended up, not going to school like that year, and got in heavy in the streets. So, I had a moped at this point. So I'm running around selling weed, a little bit of cocaine. Kids that were basically the only people who weren't in school at the time were losers, drug addicts, scumbags, thieves, scams, whatever. So they became the people I saw every day and the people I dealt with every day. And so I started trading cocaine and weed for stolen merchandise. It wasn't ever a plan. They just come over and go, "Hey, I got this car amp, give me a $20 bag of weed for it." I'm like, "I know I could sell that amp for $75 easy." And I throw it over there, and here you go. And before you know it, I got all this stuff. So my Uncle Pete comes over one day. He walks in my room. He's laughing about something. I remember he's laughing when he walked in. And he looks and goes, "What the hell's all this shit?" And I said, "Oh, stuff I've been buying off the streets." "What are you doing with it?" I'm like, "Son, you need an amp, you need a stereo, you need whatever, TV, whatever." He's like, "No," but he's like, "No, me and my paisan, we just opened a pawn shop up in Gratiot." He's like, "Bring it all in there. We'll cash you out. Give you a good deal." So I said, "Okay." I loaded it all up in the car, drove it there, and it gave me one lump sum. It was like half of what I would have asked for it anyways, but it was triple of what I paid for it. So I was like, I don't care. So now I'm taking merch. Now I'm in a stolen merch business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started selling steroids around this time too. I started getting to working out. My boy, I was kind of envious of my boy. He's a big muscle head and a good looking guy, and all the girls liked him and stuff. So I started working out like him and buffing up. I had pretty good genetics, so it happened pretty quick. And then, then the fighting started. I mean, there's always a fighter, always fighting, even as a skinny, wiry little freaking kid. I can send you a picture and you can cut it in if you want. I mean, just this wiry, skinny, like muscle bound kid, but not big, it was just skinny. And then I started working out and I started getting big. And so more and more people started testing me, and I was good I was a good fighter, man. I was nasty with these, bro, nasty. And I just started beating the shit out of everybody. And after you beat the shit out of a couple tough guys, nobody messes with you no more. You know what I'm saying? You're like, like, that kid's a freaking badass. I seen him whoop so-and-so is supposed to be a tough guy, and he freaking beat the shit out of him. So now everyone sees me and they're like, "Hey, Al, what's up, Al?" Shake my hand. "How you doing, Al? Good to see you." Everybody's respectful, It just changed. It was like flicking a freaking light switch, bro. Around 17 years old, when I hit a little puberty, started working out, I beat a few asses, and suddenly the kids that were, I'd see them around 2, 3, 4, 5 years older who always kind of were bullies and kind of dicks to me. They're all now, hey, how you doing? Buy you a drink, hang out. And I'm like, uh-huh. I'm like, really? I mean, punk ass motherfucker. You know, thought you were tough with me freaking a couple years ago, and now you know I can whoop your ass. But whatever, man. It's just that's the story of life in anybody's neighborhood. It just is what it is. So I didn't really hold it against anybody. I just didn't like them. I wouldn't like them, wouldn't hang around them. But so around this time, I started selling steroids, and I got heavy into that and made a bunch of freaking money. Had all these high schools in the area, like 5 high schools. And I live in the east side of Detroit. So there's 3 high schools just in my city. Each one of them has like 4,000 kids or whatever. And then there's Roseville, Fraser, East Detroit, Clinton Township, Harrison Township, Mount Clemens, Warren. I mean, where Eminem went. Eminem and I are the same age. He lives like 5 miles from me. And I didn't know him. I see him one time at Gilbert's Lounge when I walked in to sell some coke, and somebody goes, "Hey, you know who that is?" I'm like, "Who?" They're like, "Right there," and he nodded to him. Like, "That's Eminem." I'm like, "The kid on the My Name Is kid from the radio?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, well, does he need any coke?" That's what I said. "He need any coke because I got a bunch of it." And he's like, "They're like, I don't know. We don't talk to him." And I'm like, My name is," and that was it. Of course, then he blew up and became super. And I also been encountered Kid Rock a couple times. He came to he came to a party that I was bouncing at one time. My boy Gino, I just mentioned, graduation party, and I charged him and his whole crew to get in, like anyone else, $10 to get in. They stayed for a couple of beers and left. I could tell they were nervous, and they should have been, because we were a bunch of freaking tough guys from he's from Romeo. It was like a soft ass suburb, like 20 miles north of Detroit. We were from the hood, you know what I'm saying? And everybody's eyeballing him like, mother, if these guys say one freaking word, we're gonna freaking kill them in here. And it was true. If they would have said one word, we would have stomped them. And he had 4 or 5 guys with him, a couple like bodyguard type of dudes, big black dudes, big fat black dudes. They didn't matter. We would stomp their heads in, but nobody was being a dick to him at all. They just kind of looking at him like, "What the, who the frick is you? Why are you here? You know, it's a graduation party, man." Anyways, he left, and then I got jumped at another party that he was hosting in East Detroit. And that he left before I got jumped, but that's a whole nother story. I do a show on that on my YouTube, talk about how I got jumped by how I got jumped by 5 guys and got my ass whooped. Because I have got my ass whooped a couple times by getting jumped. That was one of them. So, anyways, school, I no more school. I go part-time to adult ed, whatever, selling these steroids and making a little money that way. And weed and steroids is what I did. And of course, the stolen property on the side was a little side hustle. I basically didn't go to school ever. I went here and there, but not much. As adult ed, you show up when you show up, and it is what it is. And it was basically a joke. I could smoke a joint, walk into school, sit down, flirt with some girls, boom, boom, boom. They literally clocked you in and clocked you out. And that's how you passed. So if you just clock in and sit there, you passed. Which the irony of that is I don't know how I learned through osmosis or something. Because when I was in the county jail shortly, I did this for the steroids. I get busted for selling steroids. They put me in the county jail. And like, "Want to take your GED?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'll give it a shot." So they give me a pretest to see where I stand and where I need to study. You know what I'm saying? So the pretest kind of evaluates what you need to study. So I do the pretest to come back and say, "Bro, you aced it. Like, you don't even need to study. Like, you're ready." I'm like, "Yeah." Like, yeah. So I'm like, cool. I must have learned something when I was sleeping in school high as hell. And so they gave me the test, and I scored so high that I won a $700 scholarship. Believe it or not, I got a letter.
Wow.
I was in the top 500 scores of the GED in the country, and I got a letter from George Bush Sr. It was like a stamp letter, but it said, "Congratulations, and here's $700 for your first class, any school of choice." And I'm like, "Oh, hell, freaking yeah!" They were all proud of me in the jail. And so I did go to community college for about a year and a half and got straight A's and had a blast, had a good time there, and just chasing girls and acting like I was a normal kid, But it didn't last, because what happened is I was living with my grandparents at the time, my grandma, Grandpa Toko. I did busted with the steroid thing, and I ended up doing, I did 3 months in the county jail. My grandfather bought a judge off, paid him $10,000, so I didn't go to prison. It was 2 hand-to-hand deliveries of $5,000 worth of steroids right to the cop. I was cooked. And it's the conspiracy to deliver there, and they just had, and I was involved in a huge steroid bust. You look it up, I think it was 1992. If you look it up, it was all over the newspaper. It's huge. The newspaper article when I was arrested said steroid bust leads to organized crime, and of course that made me look really bad in the papers, and to the guy who got busted by the feds. I went and met him. I said, "Yo, I didn't say nothing, Joe. I said nothing." He's like, "I know you didn't, man. They just know who you are." They know who we are and they know who you are. So they followed you. I was on a wire. I was on a mic talking to this guy all the time. I'm going to come over and use your tanning bed. He said, yeah. And you open a safe and I get, $5,000 worth of steroids, $10,000 steroids. I put them in a bag and I walk out. And they're watching everything. The feds are watching this for months. And so they end up busting him. The feds do. And then like 3 days after the feds bust him, the state comes and gets me for this, state case I got. And they waited till after they bust him because they didn't want to rattle the cage, I guess. And I didn't tell, nothing like that. My grandpa was very upset, very mad. My uncle Salvatore Tocco, my mother's other brother, picks me up. He says, Grandpa's going to see the judge tomorrow. He wouldn't even look at me. Because they're all really against drugs, selling drugs for these reasons. And, and they were all about gambling business, where you don't really get any trouble for it. And, but they knew I was just a bad kid. So they got over it a couple of days. I was living with my grandparents when I got out of jail. And to get on my feet, before I went to jail, I was living with my cousins Dino and Joe. We had our own house. It was like Party Central. It was like Jersey Shore. That's what it was. My life was back there in Detroit was literally Jersey Shore. We were Jersey Shore before Jersey Shore, bro. All these freaking Italian kids in the club partying, fighting. We had our own house. I was 19. Dino was like 21. Joe was 22. And and they're all bodybuilders, super handsome, like freaking these really handsome dudes, bodybuilders. And I'm the youngest kid. I'm the young cousin. I lived in the basement and all these freaking beautiful girls coming and going all the time. All these parties. We lived right on 7 Mile. And my address was 19210. And you can Google Maps it. You can see it 19210. And the reason I remember that is because the show 90210 was out. Yep. So ours is 19210. And so anyways, I get out of jail and living with my grandparents was cool because my grandmother cooked for me. She did my laundry for me. She catered to me. If I said, Grandma, I need a sandwich, she'd boom, sandwich is made. Here you go. And that's just what Italian women do. It's just their instinct and how they were born and raised to do. Sicilian. But on the other hand, my grandmother hated the girls calling my house because I had a girlfriend. So she hated that girls were constantly calling the house for me. And she'd say, another butana. Another butana. I mean, whore. Mm-hmm. My grandma, they can hear that. The whole freaking and she's like, don't you know he has a girlfriend? What's wrong with you? Don't you have any respect for yourself? I grabbed the phone. Come on, Grandma, and I would sneak him in and freaking bang him in the basement. It was horrible. So I couldn't live there that long. I lived there about a year and a half. Said enough is enough. I'm moving in with my boys and got heavy into the game again. And then but at that time, what's important, the reason I'm telling you all that is what's important is during that 1 year and a half time, Tony Giacalone started coming around. And I learned a lot about how the mafia was run in Detroit. So Tony Giacalone is the face of the mob in Detroit. He's the baddest of the bad. This is a bad mother effer. I was never scared of none of the mob dudes. I'm telling you, that's the reason they liked me and had a lot of respect for me. Because I'm like, in my mind, this is how stupid a kid I was. I was an arrogant, stupid kid. In my mind, I'm like, what? Why does everybody kiss their ass? Like, this mother effing old man, I could beat the shit out of this old man in 2 seconds. Why would I be scared of him? I slapped the freaking teeth out this old mother effer's mouth. In my mind, I'm thinking that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't care if he's a mob boss. And then I'd say, so what? He's got guns? I got guns. My dad is a gun dealer. So I used to say, man, I got guns too. I got machine guns. And I'm a good mother effing shot. I'd tell him that. I told the underboss of the family this because he yelled at me one time for extorting one of the guys that was already paying one of his guys. So I started extolling this Polish dude in Hamtramck. I did the whole overlay for the sent guys in to trash his business, and then sent them back in to trash his business. And then a third time, I happened to be there while these guys came in to trash his business. And I pulled out a gun, I slapped him around. What the frick's wrong with you? And I run him out of the store, and I say, who are these guys messing with you? And he's like, man, they've been trashing my store, threatening to kill me, blah, blah. I said, listen, give me $500 a week. I'll make sure no one bothers you. He said, you sure? I thought I was already paying. I'm like, what are you doing paying? Give me the 500. Next thing you know, they got a camera. They got me on a camera. They showed a video to the Zarelli guy. He's freaking, that's Pete Tocco's nephew. So they called me in. My grandpa says, yo, Tony wants to see you at the restaurant. So I thought I was going to get dinner. I walk in, they lock the doors. There's Frank Bomarino, Tony Giacalone, Tony Zarelli, and this guy named Al, I think his name was the bodyguard of Tony. They locked me in this room. And I'm like, what's up, fellas? And I look at the bodyguard, right? Laughing. I'm walking, dumb kid, I look at the kid. I go, what's up, Tony? This guy's the only thing stopping me from coming here to get you. That guy, he's this fat dude. And he goes, he flips a switch under his desk, and you hear the door lock, click. Nobody laughs. I thought it was pretty funny, but whatever. And so he says, what's this business with the Polak? I said, what do you mean business with Polak? You know, he's one of ours. He said, Jeezy is what he said. He said, Jeezy, and Jeezy. It means he's paying us already. I said, I didn't know that. He's like, because you don't ask. Like, oh, frick, I got to ask everybody to make $1 in this town? I got to go? And he says, yeah, that's how it works, Alonzo. You got to ask. You got an uncle, Uncle Pete, ask him. He'll find out. You just don't do this renegade shit. He says, you're always thinking with these. He says, one day, you can't win everything with these. One day, something comes with this. And that's when I said, Tony, I get real serious. I'm like, listen, Tony, I got this too. My dad's a gun dealer. I got machine guns, and I'm a good mother effing shot. So if somebody comes with this, they better get me. Because if they don't, I'm going to get them. And then I'm going to find the guy who sent them, and I'm going to get him. And then I like realized that could have been construed as I'm talking to him, which never I would have thought. But I was dumb and young, stupid. I didn't want him to think that. I just said it, blurted it out. And I looked at Tony. And I hadn't even talked to Tony in a year because Tony was mad at me for something I did. I was scabbing his poker game. So his poker players from his games. Scabbing. He had me work security at his poker games. And I was taking his players from my game. And only cutting every third pot instead of every pot, so there was bigger payouts. And he found out about it and busted me 3 times for it. And the third time he said, never again. He wouldn't even talk to me for like a year. So I know he's mad at me. And that's when I looked at him for help.